This story features hackers, mobsters pulling off bizarre crimes, and a spy who is both stunning and shrouded in mystery. Pulvi, the protagonist, was deeply in love with his childhood best friend. He was genuinely ready to do absolutely anything for her. And when he finally worked up the nerve to confess his feelings, she bolted away, completely flustered. After that, she spent an entire weekend ignoring his messages. Minato assumed he had upset her, and since he happened to be a hacker, he decided to track her GPS location. That's how he ended up in an alley where she was lying unconscious. The scene was horrifying, and he had no clue what had taken place. Now he is determined to uncover the truth behind what happened to the girl he loves and hunt down those responsible one by one. Just to warn you up front, this story is far more layered than your average plot. So if you're sensitive to darker themes, you might want to check out a different video on the channel. If things start feeling too heavy, you can always switch to a recommended video with a lighter storyline. But if you're ready to take on this emotional roller coaster, drop a like and leave a comment. Part 2. The story kicks off with our main character. On his very first day of high school, some girls were about how the principal just wouldn't stop talking during the opening speech. Meanwhile, Minato was standing behind them holding his phone, and with just a slight shake he managed to hack the big screen behind the stage. Suddenly a video appeared showing the principal watching inappropriate content inside his office. Yep, it was basically webcam footage recorded right there in the principal's room. Everyone burst into laughter while others found it downright disgusting. When the principal turned around, he immediately saw what was being projected. They even pointed out that his mouth looked, well, you already know what they meant. Yeah, not his proudest moment. Minami started shouting, clearly grossed out by the whole thing. And the moment she glanced at her best friend, she instantly knew he was behind it. Minato simply told her to keep quiet, and with an annoyed expression she asked how he could even pull something like that off. Later on, they were walking home together. Minami mentioned that he would probably get expelled because of what he did, but Minato confidently replied that he would never get caught since he was an elite hacker. He explained that he had integrated a gyroscope into his app, allowing him to hack systems just by shaking his phone. He also argued that the principal deserved it for watching that kind of content at school. Still, she was upset, and he kept trying to calm her down. Then Minami suddenly grabbed his cheeks and started pulling them. She told him that while he was incredibly talented, he should use his skills for good, and she truly believed he could become a real hero someday. Instead, he was wasting his abilities on dumb pranks. What a total waste. The guy turned bright red as she kept tugging on his cheeks. Bro is getting bullied and loving it, so he just said he would think about it. Right after that, she turned around and gave him an adorable smile, saying she'd be happy if he became a superhero. He had known her since they were little kids, and all he wanted was to finally confess his feelings. Later, Minami stopped by his house and started playing with the dog. Minato asked if she remembered that her birthday was coming up in a few days. His mother interrupted, thanking Minami for always coming over to help take care of the dogs. She even laughed, saying Minato was so forgetful that he never remembered to feed them. He was nothing like Minami, who was kind and attentive, and the girl seemed pleased hearing that. His mother even added that if it weren't for Minami being his friend, he probably wouldn't have any friends at all. With a mom like that who needs enemies, she absolutely destroyed him. While walking the dog, Minami commented on how amazing Minato's mom was. Meanwhile, he kept staring at her, searching for the perfect moment to confess. She turned back and noticed he was completely distracted. Then she attached a pendant to the dog's collar, revealing it had the initial of her name. She hugged the puppy, saying it looked incredibly cute. Joking around, she mentioned that the pendant carried both her initial and his, and then handed Minato another one with the letter M. She suggested he could attach it to his phone, just like she did with hers. At that point, he was completely smitten, because that was basically a couple's charm. Yeah, my guy already planned the wedding in his head. She even asked to borrow his phone so she could attach the charm for him. Minami said she had seen that pendant being used by a famous K-pop singer. Once she finished, Minato accidentally blurted out loud that this was the perfect moment to confess. Hearing that, Minami was caught off guard, since he had said it out loud without realizing. He then asked why she was making that face. At that moment, Minato froze, realizing he had actually said those words out loud. He quickly stood up, repeatedly apologizing. Minami was just as shocked, guys. She definitely hadn't seen that coming. Little by little, she stepped back in disbelief, then said she needed to go home because something important had come up. This dude waited for years to confess, only to fumble it in the worst way possible. Truly a legendary choke. Later on, he sent her countless messages, but Minami didn't reply. He even started thinking that maybe she was upset with him. She's obviously avoiding me, the boy kept telling himself. He tried calling her multiple times, but she never picked up. Then suddenly someone else answered, saying that the phone belonged to a girl named Minami. He couldn't understand why a stranger had her phone. And just like that, the person on the other end explained everything, leaving him completely frozen. Later, Minato rushed to the hospital. There, Minami was admitted in critical condition. Minato just sat there, completely expressionless. After all, the girl he had always loved was now in a coma. Behind him stood two investigators. The woman thanked Minato for coming, explaining that Manami had been hospitalized for 2 days, and they hadn't been able to identify her. Furious, he demanded to know what had happened. The female investigator said she would explain everything in detail once the family arrived, but the man beside her jumped in, saying they had found her unconscious in an alley. The woman turned to him, trying to stop him, but he insisted it was fine to share. He added that Minato seemed to be her childhood friend, though they needed to be careful about revealing confidential information. She had been left unconscious near a garbage collection area all night long, and if they had found her any later, it might have been too late. Judging by the state of her clothes and the marks on her body, it was clear she had been through something horrific. You already know where this is going. After hearing the details, the boy broke down in tears, and the investigator mentioned that the culprit was most likely a hacker. That immediately caught Minato's attention. The investigator explained that recently there had been multiple cases of hackers breaking into women's phones and blackmailing them into committing crimes. Apparently, they were even live streaming these girls, and you can probably guess what kind of content those streams involved. The detective admitted he hadn't personally seen the broadcasts, but believed they were hosted somewhere on the dark web. All they knew was that the victims were left injured and bearing marks from restraints. Just like Manami, the female investigator told him to stop talking, and he apologized, admitting he had been insensitive and scratching his head as he said he was just venting. But our protagonist brought up his friend's phone. He wanted to know where her device was. Suspicious, the detective asked why. The boy said he wanted to find out what she had been doing the night she disappeared. The female investigator let out a small laugh, saying the kid was sharp. However, that kind of investigation was police work, and they were already examining the phone. But the boy argued that if the forensic process wasn't handled properly, the data could be erased. That's why it was essential to follow the golden rule and create a backup first. The investigators were highly trained. Minato assumed they had already made that backup and even asked if he could check it. With an awkward laugh, the woman said he really was clever, but they apologized, explaining they couldn't share police evidence with a civilian. Frustrated, he asked what he was supposed to do, just sit there with his arms crossed and do nothing? At that moment, he received a notification on his phone and mentioned that her parents had arrived at the hospital, so he was going down to meet them. The two investigators commented on how curious the boy was, and the woman noted that Minato seemed very responsible, but the man couldn't help feeling suspicious of him, especially since the main suspects were hackers. That night, when he got home, he tried to hack into Manami's phone. Since they had connected to the same Wi-Fi before, he was able to attempt access. He adjusted some settings, but the connection was denied because the device was turned off. Even hackers are powerless against a dead battery. The scene then shifts to a flashback from several years ago, where she asks if it's true that someone called Perfect Number had hacked all those computers. Minato was the #1 fan of this hacker known as Perfect Number, but Manami brushed it off, saying it sounded like nothing more than an exaggerated rumor. However, Minato got irritated, insisting it was real, and saying that one day he would ask Perfect Number to teach him how to become a hacker on that level. Manami replied that the guy had already been dead for 14 years, but Minato refused to believe it. Just to clarify, they hadn't even properly explained what this hacker had done to become so famous, but everything related to Perfect Number was surrounded by mystery. The only confirmed detail was that he was Japanese. Manami asked if her friend truly admired that guy, and the boy nodded without hesitation. He proudly claimed to be that hacker's biggest fan, and pointed out that the man had died exactly 14 years ago, the same year they were born. Because of that, Manami teased him, joking that maybe he was the hacker's reincarnation. Fast forward to the present, and he was in his room crying. He felt like he hadn't been strong enough to protect her. The scene cuts back to the hospital. The doctors had conducted toxicology tests, but every result came back negative. The girl's mother was in tears, since more than a week had passed, and her daughter still hadn't woken up. The doctor admitted that the situation was extremely unusual. Her blood pressure was stable, and there were no signs of brain trauma. If they could at least figure out what had happened to Manami that day, they might be able to administer something to wake her from the coma. But as more time passed, the chances of her regaining consciousness kept decreasing. The boy sat beside his friend, desperately begging her to recover. Her birthday had already gone by, and he remembered the gift she had given him. Back in the classroom, the students were mocking Manami, calling her a sugar baby. News about what had happened to her had spread, and of course people started making up rumors. Some girls even claimed she had been using illegal substances. That scumbag blonde guy even said she had asked for what happened to her. But at that moment, the red-haired girl snapped, asking why that creep was staring at her. The one silently listening to everything was Minato. The blonde jerk added that he knew Minato used to hang around with that troublemaker girl. Then Minato fired back, exposing everything. He revealed that the blonde guy sent inappropriate messages to girls using fake accounts. that the black-haired girl pretended to be a college student to get drunk at bars, and that the redhead secretly met up with their married teacher at motels, and somehow, people like them still had the nerve to badmouth someone they barely knew. Yeah, the hypocrisy is insane. The blonde guy grabbed Minato angrily. "What's your problem? Are you admitting you did that?" At that moment, the jerk was about to throw a punch and even lunged at him. During break time, Minato went up to the rooftop. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to his friend, but then his phone suddenly buzzed. It was Minami's phone. And now, he finally had access to it. That instantly got him fired up. He quickly pulled his laptop out of his bag and started trying to break into her device. He needed to act fast before the police shut it down again. Within moments, he successfully accessed the phone. Since the investigators suspected she had been hacked, he began searching for traces of it. And just like that, he started digging through the data. If Minami had truly been hacked, there had to be some kind of record left behind. So he went even deeper and eventually discovered some suspicious code. On top of that, there was an app installed that she normally never used. That kind of app automatically took photos without the user knowing. Furious, he declared that he had found a lead and would go after those responsible. He connected a device to his laptop. No matter how many IP addresses the culprit used, he was going to track them down. Most likely, the attacker had infected Minami's phone with a virus, forcing her to install that application. Then he accessed the photos that the app had captured. He was shocked, because his suspicions were confirmed. That person had taken numerous pictures of Minami without her knowledge. He hesitated for a moment, nervous about opening them, but he had no choice if he wanted answers. And sure enough, there were countless photos of her in all kinds of situations. Even at night while she was lying in bed using her phone, while brushing her teeth, and even while changing clothes. Those images were most likely what the criminal used to blackmail her. When he saw the content of those photos, his anger only intensified. Then suddenly that same investigator appeared beside him, saying this was exactly how a hacker operates. Our protagonist had walked straight into the trap. The officer was holding Minami's phone inside an evidence bag, and casually remarked that it had been very easy to determine whether Minato was a hacker or not. At that moment, Minato realized he was in serious trouble. The investigator explained that he had come to the school to follow up on a report from the principal about the screen behind the stage being hacked, and the main suspect for that incident was none other than Minato. He then asked directly if the boy was responsible. Without answering a single question, Minato grabbed his laptop and ran. He knew he was completely screwed, and the only thing the investigator did was laugh. Right after that, he immediately made a phone call. He tells his partner that the boy really is a hacker, and even asks for a full background check on him. Meanwhile, Minato was already on the run. He knew that telling the truth about what happened to Minami might help him, but since the officer had discovered he was also a hacker, that only made things worse. He had broken into his friend's phone to search for clues, yet that alone could already be considered a crime. In other words, guys, he was completely cornered. Out of frustration, he punched the wall. He realized there was no point in telling the police what he had found. Right then, his phone started ringing, and when he checked it, it was a remote notification. It was coming from the same hacker who had tampered with Minami's phone. Mafia-level criminals. They weren't reaching out intentionally, guys. It was more like an accidental signal leak, and Minato quickly noticed that these people weren't as good at hiding as they thought. The criminals were located in a central part of the city, and outside there was a highly advanced car. Our protagonist made his way there and realized it was actually a nightclub. He sat outside, leaning his back against the vehicle. Inside, they were getting ready to start a live stream. They even began checking if the cameras and microphones were working. From outside, Minato was monitoring everything and even managed to intercept their signal. A countdown began, and he was instantly stunned. Inside, there was a woman chained up, and those scumbags announced that the show was about to begin, calling it a masquerade ball. The moment he saw the woman restrained, his anger started boiling. Minato even grabbed his phone, thinking he should call the detectives. During the broadcast, they introduced a so-called special item. They called it the Pearl Mirror, and it was nothing more than a pill. This miracle drug would supposedly make the victim obey any command, and Minato overheard them saying it couldn't be detected by any toxicology test. That's when he remembered what had happened to his friend. The doctor had said it was strange that she hadn't woken up, since her brain was fine and no substances were found in her system, so that must have been the pill she had taken. While the guy continued streaming, viewers flooded the chat, and to kick things off, he planned to force her to take the drug. He tried to shove it into her mouth, but she spat it out. Because of that, he slapped her, complaining that the pill was expensive. She begged him to let her go, and joking toward the camera, he said that today's girl seemed pretty feisty, but once she swallowed the pill, she would become a completely different person. So he forced the pill into her mouth and made her drink from a bottle. Even then, she threw up. Still, he celebrated, saying that at least she had swallowed it. Now she would turn into a complete puppet and obey every command they gave. To test it, he asked if she would truly obey him. The girl stood there, frozen without answering. Seeing this, Manito couldn't believe it was real. Through tears, she began saying that her role was to fulfill any request, and he couldn't help imagining his own friend going through the same thing. Outside, he kept watching that disturbing live stream. Furious, he swore he would make every one of them pay. He checked inside the car and noticed expensive filming equipment, and also spotted a fire exit at the top of the building where the stream was being filmed. He could use that entrance to get inside. He even found an online listing for the place and managed to view the building's layout. He knew he couldn't just stand there waiting for the police while a victim was still inside, so all he needed to do was lure them outside. Of course, he was terrified, but he couldn't sit back and watch another girl suffer the same fate as his friend. And just like that, he managed to hack into the electric car guys. On top of that, he disabled the entire building's security system. Now that he had control of both the car and the building, he was ready to execute his plan. He put on his jacket. With everything prepared, he declared that he would save that girl. He needed to steady his breathing. It was time to rescue her. He shook his phone, unlocking the door. With ease, he entered the building. While inside, the masked man kept announcing that the party was only getting started. The girl had become completely obedient, and now it was time for the clients, the viewers, to place bids and request the most extreme actions. So they were told to start sending money. He grabbed the phone to read the comments, and the chat was filled with disturbing messages. To fulfill one of the requests, they removed her restraints. She collapsed to the floor, and that creep laughed, saying this next request was going to be very entertaining. Then they ordered the girl to do something specific, and she immediately began to obey. And just as she was about to fully comply with it, they suddenly heard a noise coming from outside. Of course, those idiots froze in shock, asking what that loud sound was. When they checked the security cameras, they realized someone had tried to steal the car and ended up crashing it into the wall by accident. The car had been reversing, and the Mohawk guy immediately ran off, shouting for them to pause the broadcast for a moment because his car was being stolen. So everyone rushed outside, saying they were going to stop the thief. Meanwhile, the boy was hiding upstairs. 5 of them had already gone outside, and using his phone, he was managing to control the car while also watching them through the security cameras. As soon as he noticed the guy standing in front of the vehicle, he stepped on the gas. Those idiots started yelling at the thief to stop and not take the car away. They even began pounding on the windows, but it was useless. Our hero kept accelerating, and as a result, he ran over one of the mafiosos. Yeah, that definitely ruined his day. They immediately started cursing at the supposed thief inside the car. Little did they know, there was no one inside at all. Meanwhile, the protagonist kept controlling the car and tried to run over the other mafiosos as well. He figured that was enough for now, since his goal was only to use the car as a distraction. He kept accelerating, and some of them even commented that whoever was inside must be completely insane. At that point, the car was already totally wrecked, and that spiky-haired mafiosi started shouting for everyone to get back inside. Then he pulled out a gun. Inside, the guy with the beanie was still checking everything on the security cameras, but he noticed that one of them began to go dark. He even asked what the hell was going on. More cameras started shutting off until eventually all of them went black, and right behind that mafioso was Manito, who struck him with a fire extinguisher. Clean hit, no respawn. Now he finally had the chance to save that girl. He was breathing heavily, and when he looked at her, she seemed almost unconscious. He approached her and said he had come to rescue her, but it was no use. She had completely lost her mind. He knew he had to act fast and take her upstairs, but something caught his attention. It was that exact pill, the Pearl Mirror. If he took that pill with him, maybe he could find a cure for his friend. So he reached out to grab it. But at that moment, the girl grabbed him. She started muttering some slurred words. He realized she was saying that her role was to fulfill requests. He told her to get off him or he would lose the pill, but she kept trying to climb on top of him until she suddenly grabbed his face. She said she would do anything he asked, and she spoke in a soft, almost gentle voice, but he pushed her away, telling her to get a hold of herself. She fell hard to the other side. Time was running out fast, and he needed to retrieve that medicine. But when he looked at the puddle of water, the pill was gone. He started searching everywhere while the girl kept repeating that she would fulfill all his requests. The shameless guy couldn't help but stare at her. Yeah, not exactly the time, but here we are. And when I say he stared, I'm not exaggerating. The kid was completely mesmerized, but he had to snap out of it and told her to calm down. Outside, the mafiosos were injured because of the out-of-control car. They asked if the boss was okay, and even said they should break the window and pull the driver out. One of them started hitting the car, and another mafioso walked over, telling everyone to move aside. When he looked inside, he realized there was no one there. Because of that, he shouted that it was a decoy and they needed to get back inside. However, the door was locked. That's when they realized they had fallen into a trap. Classic. The guy started cursing, saying there had to be someone inside. Meanwhile, the boy held the girl tightly and said he wanted to make a request. He asked her to escape with him. If she could grant any wish, then this one should work. But she didn't seem to understand. Right after that, she suddenly looked scared, and then she started screaming. He tried to calm her down, asking her to listen to him. He had only broken into this place to save her, but it wasn't working, so he took off his jacket and handed it to her. Little by little, she began to calm down, and he told her his name was Manito. He said he had a childhood friend named Manami. His friend had been unconscious for a week without waking up, and he had been investigating to find out what happened to her. And when he saw that this girl was going through the same thing, he had no choice but to break in and save her. He firmly grabbed her arm, saying he was only there to protect her. He asked her to cooperate because he just wanted to help. He even said he would never forgive those mafiosos and that he wouldn't let her suffer the same fate as his friend. That's why he needed her to trust him. He said all of this with strong determination. The girl didn't respond and then started crying. She stammered that she would trust him and that they would escape together. The boy stood up and reached out his hand. Outside, the mafiosos were trying to enter the password to open the door, but it wasn't working. So their boss fired his gun. Now that the door was damaged, they could finally get in. The boss even ordered them not to let those intruders leave alive. Meanwhile, the two of them were trying to make their way upstairs. The boy heard the gunshot, and when he turned around, he realized the pill was gone. He could have spent more time searching for that medicine, but he chose to prioritize saving the girl. But right then, the large screen suddenly flickered back on. He glanced at it to understand what was happening, and at that moment, he saw footage of his friend. Manami appeared in those recordings, desperately begging to be set free. She had already taken 3 pills, yet she still refused to follow their commands. Seeing that footage made his anger boil over. The girl kept pleading for them to release her, and instead of escaping, Minato remained there, watching that horrifying video. The criminals mocked her while she cried in despair. They were curious to see how many pills she could endure. The boy collapsed onto the ground. Watching it was unbearable, yet he couldn't look away. She hadn't taken just 3 pills, but countless ones. Yeah, they really went overboard. That was the reason she ended up in that vegetative state. The man said he would let her go if she revealed who she was in love with. And poor Manito was forced to witness all of it. The mafioso insisted that if she loudly said the name of the person she loved, they would free her. The boy watched anxiously, and then she shouted to the cameras that she loved her friend Manito and wanted to spend her life with him. At that moment, he couldn't hold back his tears. Meanwhile, the mafioso mocked her again, saying he would test yet another pill. Faced with such cruelty, Minato's rage exploded, and he slammed his fist against the ground. The man even sneered, saying that since he was Minato, she should obey him. The protagonist's anger grew so intense that he started shouting, and right behind him stood a mafioso, pointing a gun at his head. The man asked if this young man was Minato, and commented that the girl had been pure and gentle. But in the end, she turned out to be incredibly strong. She only resisted like that because she wanted to save herself for him, since she loved him. He even added that no matter how many pills she took, she never obeyed. At that instant, Minato lunged at the criminal and slammed him to the ground. He grabbed that bastard tightly by the neck and demanded how he could do something like that to an innocent girl. He was worse than a demon. However, one of the mafiosos struck him with a kick to the face. The boy fell to the ground, and right after that, he grabbed his phone. On the big screen in the room, the mafioso's bank account suddenly appeared. The boss asked what that was supposed to be. He quickly realized that his Bitcoin wallet had been hacked. One of the henchmen even questioned why the cryptocurrency numbers were dropping. They were being robbed in real time, and of course Minato was the one behind it. The boss grew furious and demanded to know what the boy was doing. As he approached the screen, he noticed the numbers rapidly decreasing. Naturally, the mafioso started to panic. Meanwhile, in the background, Minato let out a laugh and remarked that these idiots had no sense of security at all. He kept one hand over his face, covering his left eye. He even said it had been ridiculously easy to break into their accounts, which left the bald man fuming. To be honest, you're terrible even as criminals. That was exactly why it had been so simple to steal all their dirty money. He converted every Bitcoin into yen and transferred everything into his own wallet. One of the mafiosos rushed to the computer to confirm and realized the balance had truly dropped to 0. At that point, the boss pointed his gun at the protagonist's head, ordering him to return all the money. If he didn't give it back, he would blow his brains out. The protagonist, still covering his eye, asked if he really had the nerve to pull the trigger, since if he died, the money would be gone forever. Besides, keeping that money wasn't even enough to count as proper revenge. But the bald man replied that the money didn't belong to him, but to his superior. That's when the hero realized there was someone above them. The bald man kept threatening Minato, and with a serious expression, Minato thought that only a few more seconds were needed. The man said that maybe he couldn't shoot the boy because he needed the money back, but there was something else he could do. He would shoot the girl Minato was trying to save, especially since she was wearing his jacket, which made it obvious they were connected. And all the while, Minato still had his hand covering his eye. Looking upward, he realized there were only a few seconds left. Then he told the man that if he wanted, he could go ahead and shoot the girl, since protecting his own life was obviously more important than saving her. But the mafioso replied that there was nowhere for the boy to run, and that no matter what, he was finished. Minato then revealed that there was a reason he had kept one eye closed, and at that moment he shook his phone, causing all the lights in the area to shut off. He also triggered the fire alarm, and water began pouring throughout the entire place. But he had set the water pressure to the maximum. Since he had kept one eye covered, it had already adjusted to the darkness, allowing him to see clearly. This was the perfect chance to escape, especially since the water was coming down like a full-on waterfall. Yea, indoor waterfall, not exactly part of the decor. So he started running, searching for the girl. Within moments, he reached her. Right after that, he grabbed her tightly and whispered in her ear that they needed to leave immediately, reminding her that he had promised to protect her. Without wasting time, he pulled her along with him. They needed to head up the stairs to reach the upper floor, taking advantage of the darkness. The water kept crashing down over the mafiosos, but suddenly it stopped, and the lights came back on without warning. That definitely wasn't part of the plan, and the mafioso immediately aimed his gun at the hero. At that instant, the woman shoved the boy aside, protecting him. As he hit the ground, he wondered what was happening. The girl had fallen on top of him. For a moment, he thought she had been shot. Then the mafioso approached and he moved in front of her to stop her from getting kicked. The girl was crying and trembling, and the boy stayed there, acting as a human shield. He kept taking multiple kicks, but he needed to find another opening. When he checked his phone screen, he realized his admin privileges had been revoked. In other words, it was as if another hacker had entered the system and stripped away his control. At that moment, the mafioso removed his jacket and, aiming his weapon, said he would ask one last time for the boy to return the money. The hero replied that he would give it back, as long as the girl was allowed to leave alive. After taking off his jacket, it became visible that he had a tattoo on his chest. The woman stared at that tattoo while breathing heavily, and the moment she saw that symbol, her expression changed instantly, and she declared out loud that she had found them. Right then, she quickly stood up, leaving Minato completely stunned. She placed her hands on the ground and delivered a swift kick straight to that bastard's face. Clean combo, no warning. Even the hero had no idea what was going on anymore. All he saw was the mafioso being sent flying. The henchmen were completely confused, and their boss collapsed with his eyes rolled back. He asked the girl if she was okay. He even told her she needed to get out of there as fast as possible, but she was already putting on her glove, when in that moment she removed the hairpin from her hair, when it turned out to be a weapon. Her long hair fell down to the ground as she took on a strange stance, and when she opened her eyes, she looked slightly unhinged. Monotud couldn't understand anything anymore. The mafiosos started shouting for them to capture that woman. She gripped the weapon tightly, and when she pressed a button, it fired. Monotud wondered what kind of weapon that even was. Wasn't that just a simple hairpin? And after pressing another button, she rushed toward the man and struck him. The guy was launched away, and she slid across the water. He realized that this woman was far from normal, and little by little, she took them all down, one by one, and she was making them suffer quite a bit while doing it. On top of that, her skill level was incredibly high. Monitor started thinking that this woman was a monster, and even questioned why the pearl mirror hadn't affected her. Not only was she terrifying, but she also had a hidden weapon in her hair. He even remembered the expression she made when she said she had found them. Most likely she had been hunting those mafiosos all along. Meanwhile, she continued eliminating the remaining men, and Monitor just stood there, watching everything unfold. He had believed that she was a victim and had gone through so much trouble to break in just to save her, but now he realized that the only victim there was himself. Your plot twist hit him harder than the kicks. He remained crouched on the ground as the mysterious woman approached him. At that moment, she wrapped a wire around his neck and stepped down hard on it, forcing him downward. The boy asked why she was doing this, and she replied that he was annoying, even asking if he really thought that grabbing that medicine would let him save his girlfriend. Monito asked if she knew something, and with an angry expression, he demanded that she tell him everything she knew. She kept him pinned to the ground while he questioned her about the pearl mirror, that very drug. She says he really never gives up and just keeps repeating himself like a parrot. With a smile, she asks how he can be worried about his girlfriend when she's right there about to kill him. He replies that he doesn't care about his own life. The only thing he wants to know is whether Minami can be cured. The mysterious woman keeps watching him closely. She says the truth is going to leave a bitter taste in his mouth, because in reality, his girlfriend will never recover. There is no known treatment for that kind of drug. Maybe the only person who knows anything is the one who created it, their boss. Monito asks if she knows the leader of those mafiosos, but she tightens the wire even more. She even says it's time for him to die, since she won't be telling him anything else. She wasn't in the habit of killing kids, but he had seen too much, so there was no way she could let him live. But the boy tells her she's forgetting something. There's still someone else, he says to her. When she looks to the side, it's that mafioso, the boss of those henchmen. Then he fires 2 shots. The bullets head straight toward the mysterious woman. However, she lets out a laugh and effortlessly dodges, immediately throwing her weapon at the criminal. Smooth reflexes, blink and you miss it. Her weapon ends up lodged into the barrel of his gun, and when he pulls the trigger, his weapon explodes. She comments that she didn't expect him to wake up so quickly. Our hero still couldn't understand why the girl he was trying to save was now trying to kill him. Even so, the only thing on his mind was finding where the boss of those criminals was to discover a cure for that pearl mirror. Maybe if he could obtain an antidote, he could save Manami. The thug starts cursing, saying she isn't even a police officer to be interfering in their business. At that moment, she drives her weapon into the man's hand and tells him to stay quiet because she has some questions. She says she wants to know where his boss is, so he better start talking. At that moment, Monito realizes that she is also after that boss. She opens his shirt to reveal the tattoo. She was hunting people who had those hidden markings. Then she pulls out her phone and takes a picture. Their boss was extremely cautious and no one had ever seen him. Only his executives appeared publicly, and all of them had that same tattoo on their chest. Since he was one of those executives, the girl insists that he must know where the boss is. Our hero was still confused, unable to fully grasp what was going on. He even considers that maybe this boss was the hacker who played that recording right when he was about to leave. He begins connecting the dots, because it made perfect sense that their boss had been watching everything the entire time. The criminal keeps insisting that he knows nothing. The girl smiles again and strikes him. The man screams in pain and she says she'll only ask one more time. Shouting, he claims he doesn't know where the boss is. Then Monito steps in, saying that even if the man did know, he would never reveal it, because the boss was watching him. The man asks how the boy could possibly know that, but Monito had only been guessing. Yet the moment the man reacted like that, it basically confirmed it. Monito was certain they were being monitored by a hacker. He just wasn't sure it was the boss. Fixing her hair, the woman asks what he means by that, and Monito explains that he figured it out because of Manami's recording. Right when they were about to leave the building, that video started playing on the big screen. That meant the boss had been listening to their conversation the whole time, and used the footage just to delay him. And when he shut off the lights, the boss managed to regain control of the building and turned them back on. In such a short time, that boss had even stripped Monito of his admin privileges. In other words, they were dealing with a top-tier hacker. Yeah, final boss energy. Right now, that boss was probably sitting comfortably at home, controlling everything and watching through the cameras. Monito even threatens that he will definitely find him. The mafioso starts yelling at the boy, telling him not to mess with that boss because he was a big shot. And at that moment, he suddenly collapses and dies. Minato knew this had to be the boss's doing, especially since the guy had been hit by a powerful shock. He even wonders if the man had some kind of implant controlled by the hacker boss. The girl checks the criminal's pulse and confirms that he is dead. At that moment, a bright light shines, and a child appears on the screen, introducing himself formally as the creator of the Pearl Mirror, stating that his name is Perfect Number, the same name as the legendary hacker our hero admired. But when he sees that kid calling himself Perfect Number, he says that's impossible. The scene shifts into a flashback where he was talking with Manami about this perfect number. He explains that this hacker once infiltrated a criminal organization, stole all their money, and distributed it to the poor. Her best friend was irritated, completely fed up with him constantly telling those stories. After knocking her head against his, he dropped to the floor, and she kept scolding him, telling him to stop making things up. She also pointed out that he was getting so obsessed it was starting to look like some kind of religious devotion. But to him, Perfect Number was real, almost like a god. She went on about how weird he was and insisted he should stop treating that guy like some divine being. But the protagonist argued back, saying that maybe the fans of Perfect Number really were like a religion, and he even admitted he wanted to become a hacker, a true hero just like him. Manami, however, countered that hackers were nothing more than thieves. The boy disagreed. Whenever he tried to act like a hacker, he would always ask himself what Perfect Number would do. Back in the present, he found himself face to face with the one claiming to be Perfect Number. But the protagonist snapped at the kid, telling him not to mess around with him. No way that brat was the real Perfect Number. He even pointed out that Perfect Number had disappeared 17 years ago and was definitely no longer a child. The girl stayed silent, while the boy remarked that Minato seemed to know quite a lot about this hacker. Then the so-called perfect number began altering his appearance, asking if looking like an older man made him seem more believable. Right after that, he kept shifting into different people one after another, casually stating that his appearance didn't matter since he could become anyone in the world. Honestly, shape-shifting like it's a character customization screen. According to him though, the form he liked most was that of a child, simply because he found it cute. Minato insisted there was no way this guy could be the real perfect number. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman commented that this hacker was quite intriguing. Perfect Number then called the protagonist by his full name and even said he wanted the boy to work for him. He offered to turn Minato into one of his executive agents and even give him the secret formula of the Pearl Mirror. Hearing that, Minato became furious and declared he would never join him. There's no way I'm working with the guy who put Minami through all that. He also pointed out that many hackers had already claimed to be Perfect Number before. No matter what name this guy used, he would still be inferior to the real Perfect Number. Because of that, Minato swore he would expose him. The boy laughed and immediately began locking all the doors, sealing the entire building. They looked around in shock, realizing there was no escape anymore. The boy rushed over and started trying to open the door. Meanwhile, the black-haired girl laughed, commenting that this trap actually seemed kind of fun. Yeah, she's definitely built different. Over the loudspeaker, the boy kept taunting the protagonist, announcing that in 5 minutes the entire building would explode. He told Minato to quickly decide whether he would work for him or not. As the countdown began ticking down, the woman questioned why he was even showing the timer, wondering if it was just to make them panic more. Still, she decided to find a way out and delivered a powerful kick to the door. She left a visible dent in the metal, but it still didn't open. Minato had already pulled out his laptop and started typing rapidly, telling the black-haired woman not to interfere. The only way to open that shutter was through the electrical system. She asked what he had just called her, and he casually repeated that he had called her black-haired woman. Curious, she asked what he was doing, and he simply replied that 5 minutes was enough time for him to unlock the door. He needed to regain his administrator access. What does that even mean? She asked, and he explained that an administrator has access to all the main system settings. There were also guests and regular users. A guest was like a traveler just passing through. Users were like devoted followers who would do anything to obey a doctrine. Then there were admins who were like high priests teaching the rules of a god. And finally, there was the master administrator, who was essentially the god itself. In hacker terms, the system worked just like a religion. If he regained master administrator access, he could control every door in the building. He would prove that this so-called perfect number was a fraud. Over the loudspeaker, the boy continued mocking them, saying this was all just a test. If they managed to escape, he would allow them to live. It was a trial to see if the protagonist had enough talent to work alongside him. Like I'd ever want to be on your side, you pathetic imposter. According to Minato, he was the best hacker out there, so opening those doors would be easy. After all, management systems always had multiple security vulnerabilities, but the boy on the speaker claimed he had complete control over every single one of them. And the only thing the protagonist replied was, "We'll see whether you really have control or not." Just like that, he obtained Master Administrator access, and the boy was visibly surprised. The symbol changed from an S to a hashtag, with the hashtag representing maximum privileges, while the S indicated a regular user. So basically what he needed was hashtag level access, since that would grant him complete control over the building. In other words, it was like holding the mark of a god. The girl kept her eyes on the door, waiting to see if it would open, and sure enough, it slowly began to slide open. The boy was stunned, saying Minato had obtained access in less than a minute. Not even a hint of modesty there. Our protagonist casually said the test was easy, especially since his laptop was connected to the building's network, which made everything even simpler. He even claimed that this fake perfect number had no chance of winning. However, the kid quickly said that Minato was mistaken. At that moment, Minato glanced at his laptop and froze in shock, because his privileges had just been downgraded. And just like that, the door shut again. The girl got irritated, pointing out that it took forever to open the door, but closing it happened instantly. Still working on his laptop, he searched for another way to unlock it. But yeah, nothing worked. It felt like that mysterious kid was a far superior hacker. Honestly, it was like the kid was toying with him for fun. Through the loudspeaker, Perfect Number kept mocking Minato, telling him to keep trying to escape. He even bragged that it only took him 5 seconds to strip Minato of his permissions. With a grin, the boy declared it was impossible for the protagonist to defeat him. Almost 2 minutes had already passed, and Minato began losing his patience. He started typing non-stop, throwing out lines of code, and no matter how many times he tried, the same thing happened. He would gain admin access and start opening the door, only for the other guy to revoke it and shut the door even faster. This cycle went on for several minutes. No matter how many times he opened it, the other guy always closed it. Minato slammed his hand on the table, starting to lose all hope, convinced he might actually die here. Less than 3 minutes remained, and he still couldn't find any vulnerability to override the hacker's control. Over the speaker, the boy kept repeating that all Minato had to do was swear loyalty, and he could walk out alive, but the protagonist refused. There was no way he would side with someone who had hurt Minami. To demonstrate his superiority, Perfect Number started draining all of Minato's cryptocurrency, and within seconds, his balance dropped to 0. He literally had 0 bitcoins left. The shock hit so hard he nearly collapsed. It was the first time he had encountered a hacker on this level. For a moment, he even wondered if this might actually be the real Perfect Number. The boy kept laughing, telling him to make his decision already. Meanwhile, the woman remained completely calm. She even admitted that the kid must be an incredible hacker, possibly the real Perfect Number, but at the same time she said he was extremely annoying. She threw her weapon at a security camera and yanked it down, destroying it, all just to shut him up for a moment. But it didn't work, and he kept joking around, pretending like he had only lost one eye. Still, Minato refused to accept that this was the real Perfect Number. At that moment, the girl punched him straight in the chest. She told him she was getting irritated with him repeating that over and over. This wasn't the time to worry about whether that guy was real or not. He needed to focus on finding a way out of there. He replied that he had already tried everything, but the kid always found a way to stay connected to the building. While pinning him down, she told him to figure something out quickly. That's when something clicked in his mind. The core issue was that the hacker always managed to stay connected to the building. So the simplest solution was to cut off that connection entirely. He asked the black-haired woman for help, saying he needed her assistance to shut down the building's internet, because a hacker without internet and power is basically useless. However, he needed her help to locate where to do it. He wouldn't lose his own connection, since he was linked through cables. So essentially, she needed to find the ONU. She asked if he meant Uno, and he corrected her, saying that was just a card game. The ONU was a device where the optical signal entered. They needed to reach that network hub and destroy it. All external signals passed through that ONU. The internal system would keep running, which was necessary since he still needed it to open the door. Once they cut off the external internet, the boy would lose his connection to the building. She agreed to help and asked where this control point was located. He told her it was in the distribution panel in the hallway on the first floor, though getting there would be difficult. The black-haired girl asked if he was underestimating her abilities, and he denied it, even suggesting she could move through the air ducts. Maybe by crawling through the vents, she could reach the upper floor. She accepted the idea, saying it was their only option. On the screen, the hacker commented that this solution was unexpected. He even remarked that it was a shame he hadn't managed to kill him earlier. Perfect Number added that he had expected a more hacker-like solution. At that moment, Minato remembered something important. The girl simply laughed, saying she would make it there, and immediately used her weapon to break open the vent grate. Then, without hesitation, she jumped inside the ventilation shaft. They only had about a minute and a half left. He was certain that this Perfect Number was not the real one, because of a well-known quote from the hacker. "Do not limit yourself to code alone. Explore every environment available." That was precisely why this one couldn't be the original Perfect Number. Meanwhile, the woman began crawling forward. She followed the exact route he had described, and they stayed in contact through an earpiece. After reaching a hallway, she opened a door there and climbed down. However, she soon reported that this door had also been locked. Still, Minato said he had 2 more vulnerabilities he could exploit, and that he would try to open it quickly. She used her phone to send him her current location. She even mentioned that if he could unlock the door fast enough, she would be able to slip through. After typing in the commands, he told her the door was about to open. At that moment, the door started moving. She rushed to get through as fast as possible. She had assumed the electrical distribution panel would be nearby. But when she looked ahead, she was caught off guard. There was yet another door before reaching the system panel she needed. So she had to reach the other side quickly, since the door would soon start closing again. He got frustrated, thinking there was no way she could cross that corridor in time. However, he soon realized how skilled she was, as she took careful aim with her weapon. After firing, she latched onto something and used it to pull herself across. Spider-Man would be proud. He shouted in concern, thinking she might get crushed. At that moment, he lost his administrator access again, and the door instantly shut, but luckily she had already made it through. She let out a relieved sigh, saying it had been a close call. She then asked if he had insulted her earlier when he got mad. After searching around, she finally located the distribution panel. There were several boxes, and he pointed out that the white one was the ONU. To avoid disconnecting every cable, he told her she could just smash it. Perfect Number then announced that their time was finally up, and even mockingly hoped the boy could still find a way to escape the explosion. She broke the box, cutting off his access. Panicking, Minato rapidly typed commands, and finally the door began opening so they could escape. Only 30 seconds remained, and he grabbed his belongings and started running. but the door suddenly refused to open any further. It was jammed. When he looked up, he realized it was because of the dent the girl had made earlier with her kick. At that moment, panic fully set in as he grabbed the door tightly and tried to force it upward. He shouted with all his strength, but the door wouldn't budge. He needed to lift it just a bit more to reach the handle. Then suddenly, he fell to the ground. From the other side, she had opened the handle and pulled his leg. She asked if he had called her something rude earlier, and he quickly denied it while apologizing. He glanced at his watch and saw that only 5 seconds remained. They rushed up the stairs in desperation until they finally reached the emergency exit door. When they pushed it open, there was only 1 second left. They made it outside just as a massive explosion went off, blasting them away. That was some perfect timing. Literally 1 second left. He got lucky because the woman landed on top of him, cushioning the fall. Still lying on the ground, he asked if she was okay. It was clear the explosion had been enormous. The scene then shifts to a nearby location shortly afterward. Sometime later, they were outside. People were passing by as if nothing had happened. The boy was drinking from a bottle of water, saying he never imagined that simply hearing the sounds of the city could feel so comforting. The girl wanted to ask him a few questions, and what she was most curious about was why he had gone in there alone. Normally, people would call the police, so she wanted to know why he had risked his life just to save her. He said he had been watching the broadcast and couldn't just sit still. He wasn't going to let someone else go through what Minami had endured. The girl said she didn't know whether his decision had been right or wrong, but thanks to Minato, she had managed to see the mastermind's face. Even if it wasn't his real appearance, it was still a major clue. She added that if the police had shown up, the mastermind, the hacker, would never have revealed his face. The protagonist felt a bit down because he hadn't managed to recover the medicine. He wanted to know its ingredients so he could save his friend. Then the girl pulled out a hidden stash and showed him a small bag containing 2 pills. He asked how she had managed to hide them, and she explained that it was when she pretended to be drugged. He asked her to hand over the pills, however she said she already knew what they were made of. They were basically composed of wheat flour, though he didn't believe that. He argued that there had to be other chemical components causing those effects. She agreed that there probably were. However, this substance was far from harmless. Even if it was made from wheat flour, there had to be some unidentified compound mixed in. This drug was extremely potent and worked almost like a brainwashing agent. That's why the only way to figure out how to return his girlfriend to normal was to track down Perfect Number. She ended up in that comatose state because she had taken several of those pills. Normally, a person only needs to take a single pill to turn into a complete zombie. He asks what exactly she is, and she replies that she is a proxy agent. In simple terms, she was basically a secret operative. He stared at her with a very serious expression. Then he questioned why she had saved his life, and with a cute look, she said she saved him simply because she felt like it. Right after that, she started laughing, saying he was way too pure-hearted. At that point, our boy was completely lost. She was a proxy agent. Basically, she was a covert assassin hired to eliminate targets, and since he wasn't on her list, she decided to let him live. Even so, Minato suggested that they could become allies, especially since both of them were trying to reach this perfect number. The Japanese police would move far too slowly to track that guy down, so by working together they could reach that mafia boss much faster, and that was the only way to save Minami. He asked the black-haired girl to act as his hands and feet, while he would serve as the brain. He would use all his hacking skills to support her. The girl found that proposal quite interesting. She even threatened to throw him off the bridge, asking if he would actually be useful. To test whether he could be trusted, she asked what he would do if it turned out that was the real perfect number, because she wanted to know if he could really eliminate that man, considering he had been treating him like a god. What will you do when you find out that he is the real perfect number? He understood exactly what she meant. Then he answered without hesitation that he would definitely take him down. I'll personally send that bastard straight to hell. And just like that, she tossed him back onto the bridge. However, she had one condition. They had to treat that man as if he truly were the real perfect number. Only then would they be able to uncover his true identity. The protagonist asked for the black-haired girl's name, and she told him he could call her whatever he wanted since names didn't matter to her. Still, she eventually revealed that her name was Ayla Kurosaki. Yeah, that name hits like a main character reveal. He even said he could feel fate bringing the two of them together to hunt down that criminal. He added that he wanted to make one thing clear, since their partnership was perfect. His main objective was to find this perfect number and uncover the cure. So he formally introduced himself to her, stating his full name. He had been tracking that maniac in order to find a way to save his friend. Early the next day, an investigation team arrived at the site of the explosion. The same investigators handling Minami's case were also present. The team was finishing up clearing debris and removing bodies. One investigator asked if there were any nearby security cameras, and a woman replied that there was one at a convenience store near the main road. So they called over 2 recruits and instructed them to check those cameras. The rookies commented that Kasai, that investigator, was extremely strict. On top of that, he had sharp instincts and a perfect arrest record in every case he handled. The rookies even said they hoped to become like him in the future. At that moment, they headed to a shop near the station. They reviewed footage from around 10 at night near the explosion site. They spent quite a while analyzing the recordings. Kasai casually remarked that the woman on camera 4 was very attractive, and his partner immediately told him to stop acting shameless. But he kept insisting the woman was beautiful, and even asked for a zoom. His partner got annoyed, asking if he was even taking the job seriously. However, he called her over to take a closer look at the footage. He said there was something interesting she needed to see. When she checked it, she was shocked. The people caught on camera near the scene were none other than the protagonist and that woman. She immediately questioned why Minato had been near the explosion site and whether he was involved. Kazai, casually eating instant noodles, commented that the boy seemed very suspicious. The next day, the scene shifts to the school. They questioned Minato, asking what he had been doing with that woman near the exploded building. The protagonist looked uneasy, with a bandage on his face. He hadn't expected to be caught on security cameras. He wondered if he should cooperate with the investigators and tell them everything he had discovered, but that might only make things worse. He also knew that this investigator wouldn't be easy to shake off, so he simply made up an excuse, saying he had been trying to flirt with girls, since that area was full of clubs where it was easy to meet women. The investigator laughed, but the protagonist questioned why they were digging into his personal life. The investigator then explained that there had been an explosion near where Minato was, and someone had died. As he stood up, Minato asked if he could return to class. The woman said they weren't done questioning him yet, but the man allowed the boy to leave. Minato states that he has absolutely no connection to the explosion, nor to the people who lost their lives. Naturally, that immediately caught the investigator's attention. He simply forced a smile and told the boy he was free to go. The female officer questioned her partner, asking why they didn't finish the interrogation. Kazai then pointed out that no details about how many victims there were had been released. Even so, Minato had clearly said he wasn't involved with the people who died, and he said it using the plural form. The investigator quickly realized her partner had set a trap, and the protagonist walked right into it. In other words, the investigator concluded that the boy knew exactly what had happened in that building. Meanwhile, Minato sat in class with his head lowered. He was seriously terrified of getting caught, since he knew he was dealing with extremely dangerous people. Not only was he in trouble with those hackers, but now the police were also on his back. And on top of that, the black-haired woman was incredibly mysterious. Yes, and Hidalgo really picked hard mode. On top of everything, he still needed to save Minami. And at that moment, the teacher entered and told everyone to take their seats. He asked for everyone's attention and announced that from now on, they would have a new substitute teacher assisting with some tasks. She would act as a teaching assistant for the class. Minato grew curious and lifted his head to see who it was. The girl introduced herself, saying it was a pleasure to meet them and that she would be spending the next 2 weeks with the class. It was none other than Ala Kurosaki, the black-haired woman. The moment Minato realized she was in his classroom, he was completely shocked. He accidentally tangled his foot in his desk. As a result, he crashed straight onto the floor. He even shouted loudly, asking what she was doing there. Meanwhile, she calmly said she hoped to get along with everyone. Honestly, there are moments when this girl gives off serious chills. She's seriously strange. During physical education class, the boys shamelessly talked about how they couldn't wait to see the teacher in a bikini. Some even said they wished they could wrap themselves in her long hair. Yet these guys need help. Meanwhile, Minato just stood there thinking they were complete idiots. Some of them even started making bets, trying to guess the color of her swimsuit. Minato, however, assumed she wouldn't wear any swimwear at all. But when they stepped outside, there she was, wearing a black bikini. The boys were instantly captivated, and for some reason, Mino felt bothered by it. She explained that the class would be a swimming lesson and asked if they were ready for a survival exercise. The shameless boys immediately started making creepy expressions, thinking all sorts of nonsense. The exercise involved tying them up underwater and leaving only a blade for them to free themselves. The students panicked as they struggled to escape, but of course it was extremely difficult. One of the boys almost managed it, but diving down and grabbing the blade from above was practically impossible. She explained that this was a basic escape exercise and that everyone should know how to do it. But little by little, the boys actually started drowning. Yeah, this escalated fast. Minato shouted, asking if she was trying to kill them. After a few minutes, Minato himself pulled his classmates out of the water. She casually remarked that the boys were too weak, and that even elementary school students should be able to handle that. Walking up to her, he demanded an explanation. He wanted to know why she had come there, and she told him they would talk privately later. He became suspicious. Then she told Minato to tie her up, saying she would demonstrate what a student should do. The shameless boys stared at her, and when they saw Minato tying her up, their faces were filled with shock. Some even started celebrating, calling Minato a god for doing it. Bro became a legend overnight. We then see that our protagonist tied her tightly, with the rope wrapped all around her body. Some of them even started crying, claiming it was the best class of their lives. Right after that, Minato kicked her, sending her straight into the water. He wanted to see if she could really free herself. The boys jumped into the pool, saying the view from below would be even better. Meanwhile, the girls stood there, terrified that the teacher might drown. The red-haired girl commented that this whole class felt extremely strange. Meanwhile, the boys were just enjoying the scene. Ayla Kurosaki swam down to the bottom of the pool, and upon reaching it, she flipped gracefully. She grabbed the knife and quickly cut through all the ropes. The boys were shocked, realizing she was incredibly skilled. As they witnessed what they called a divine sight, they watched her swim back up to the surface. They climbed out of the pool, cheering loudly. She asked if they had learned anything, reminding them that she had demonstrated the technique herself. The boys noticed that her body was covered in rope marks and began praising her, saying she was amazing. Meanwhile, the girls looked completely unimpressed. Meanwhile, the investigators were standing outside the gym, watching everything unfold. One of them even questioned what that woman was doing at the school, acting as a teacher. That woman was Ayla Kurosaki, and she was 23 years old. The investigator also remarked that Mino was one hell of a liar. Later on, Mino went up to the school rooftop, looking for answers from Ayla Kurosaki. He wanted to understand how she managed to get a job there as a teacher, and she casually replied that she had plenty of connections. Alright, you already explained how you pulled it off. Now I want to know why. Why did you decide to sneak into the school as my teacher? He even admitted that he was already in deep trouble since the police were watching him, and things would only get worse if they found out she was also working there. However, she suddenly struck him, slamming the boy hard onto the ground. The hit was no joke. She told him that dealing with problems like that was his responsibility, since he was the brains of their partnership. She, on the other hand, specialized in action, so she didn't need to worry about those matters. But he argued that if she kept acting recklessly, there would be nothing he could do to help them. She kept staring at him intensely, and at that moment he noticed someone behind them. It was the red-haired girl. Ayla Kurosaki needed to improvise, since the situation was impossible to explain normally. So she suddenly claimed that the boy had been stalking her. The redhead questioned why the teacher was on top of a student. She even said she found it strange that the door was open, which was why she walked in. Minato had forgotten to lock it, and that's how they got caught in that situation. Then Ayla started saying that the student had been staring at her during swimming class, and later begged to buy her bikini for 100,000 yen. Our hero was about to protest, but she leaned in and whispered for him to play along. The redhead kept staring, and he knew he had to go with it or she would start spreading rumors. So he admitted that yes, he had offered 100,000 yen since it was a very beautiful bikini. The girl looked at him with pure disgust and called him trash. In the end, she just walked away. Clearly annoyed, Minato asked why she had to name such an absurd price for the bikini. He even told his partner that the red-haired girl was secretly involved with one of the teachers. Ayla Kurosaki found the students at that school quite fascinating, especially because many of them had dark secrets. Then she revealed that she infiltrated the school because one of the viewers from that previous incident belonged to the faculty. One of the people who had been sending messages to that criminal was connected to this school. So one way to get closer to the perfect number was to identify who had been invited to that broadcast. The protagonist recalled the investigator mentioning that those broadcasts were streamed and stored on the dark web. Ayla Kurosaki believed that the person involved in the broadcast was just an ordinary guest, but likely one of the higher-ups, and that individual might even be responsible for selecting the girls who went through that process. She even commented that the school was extremely disturbing, and when he hesitated, he angrily asked who it was, saying he wanted to go after that person. However, Ayla explained that they still didn't have solid information to track them down. She said it was probably one of the teachers, someone responsible for turning the girls into food for the broadcast. Yeah, that's beyond messed up. She also mentioned that she recognized Manami. She had been browsing those illegal communities to infiltrate the group. And that was when she came across one of Manami's images. At that moment, she showed it to the protagonist. He looked at the image. It was exactly the same picture that had been taken through the phone virus. Or he asked who had sent that virus to the girl, and she told him to stop yelling since they still didn't know anything for sure. She then asked if there was something in the image that seemed off to him. At that moment, he examined it more carefully. He realized that it was the school's locker room. That meant the person who sent the virus was probably someone very close to the girl. Still at the school, he grew furious, imagining that Manami had been turned into food, or rather content for that live broadcast. So what they needed to do now was figure out where that photo had originated. Ayla Kurosaki explained that there was a community called Sleeping Forest. It was a group used to share religious material, and it was managed by one of the teachers. He asked if that meant it was part of some kind of twisted cult. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to one of the teacher's rooms. He was lying on the lap of that red-haired girl. Yeah, this guy is already suspicious. She asked if he was taking pictures of her, since she didn't allow that, but he told her to relax because she wasn't visible in the photo. We then see that he was sending a picture to someone, and that person asked about her age, and that basically confirms he's the creep involved with that disturbing religion. And with that, we reach the end of the first part of this video. If you enjoyed it, drop the keyword hacker protagonist in the comments. The more comments you leave, the faster I'll bring you the continuation. I'm setting a goal for you all to hit. The last video we uploaded reached its target really quickly, so I'm already starting production on part 2 for you. I'll leave 2 recommended videos from the channel that I'm sure you'll enjoy. So I'll see you over there, and that's it for now. Thanks, and see you next time, everyone.